Hello everyone, it's time to do another deck profile, this time on the Maelstrom deck. A deck that I originally thought I wasn't going to build on release, but kind of end up doing it after one set later. But didn't do a deck profile ever since, and especially set 11 since there wasn't really much. But with set 3 and some promos, and especially the reprint off the promo, I have to say the deck is a little more unique now, and definitely is kind of worth doing a deck profile on, especially since no one else is really doing it, so I'm doing it. But anyway, what I think about the deck, it's still fun like old... But anyway, how I think about the deck, it's fun as old Aqua Force, column switching, multi-attack, more so column switching here, because this is D-Series Aqua Force, so they kind of want to differentiate a little bit from Flagberg because they kind of play the same way. In fact, some of the skills are exactly the same way. Flagberg, in fact, is the descendant of Maelstrom, so it kind of makes sense that they have a very similar skill and play a similar style. But Flagberg focuses more on the restanding rearguard for the multi-attack, and I kind of like that the Maelstrom play focuses more on the column switching for the multi-attack. So at least that there's few differences there, but other than that, the skill and what you gain out of it is kind of exactly the same. But both decks hasn't really got support for a while until recently, where we got few Maelstrom cards, but it helps out the deck a bit, but still has a lot of problems. One of the problems the deck still has is that yes, it's still key piece reliant, but there is a new card that helps out with that a bit. And another thing is there's no proper finisher for Maelstrom, and there's a lack of power of Maelstrom, especially on the Vanguard itself, since one of the things that it lost was the gaining of power compared to the originals. So that is one unfortunate side effect of the new version of Maelstrom. But other than that, it's still fun and it's a cool design, hence why I still like Maelstrom. But originally I wasn't going to play this because I had Flagberg, but I ended up playing it anyway because I like the design. But anyway, onto the deck profile itself. Starting with the Ride deck. Of course, we start off with Eric. Yes, play this because it is Aqua Force and sometimes you will need it. In which we go to Tier 9 Theo, where when the Aqua Force rides on top of it, look at your deck for one Blue Storm Armada card, aka your set order card, and add it to your hand. And the second skill, which you might use where your Vanguard's Maelstrom plus 5k during your turn, but you mainly use it for the Ride deck skill. In which we go to Argos. When rolled upon by Aqua Force, look at top 7 for one Tier Dragon or one Aqua Force from among them and put it to your hand. And yes, Tier Dragons, not just Maelstrom, it could even be like Inlet Pulse. But the second skill, which you will probably sometimes will use because of Maelstrom's skill, where if it's a 4th battle turn, plus 5k, and if an attack hits, you draw a card. I mean, it's just there if you want to do it, but you only use it mainly for the Ride deck skill, but sometimes you will call this or Soul, but sometimes you will call this from Soul just for the multi-attack, but it's just there. In which we go to Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom itself. So first off, it has a new added skill, which is actually an improvement to the original because it helps out the skills itself, where once per turn you can discard a card from hand, choose a card from your soul that is Aqua Force or Tier Dragon, and call it to rearguard, and it gets this ability. At the end of the battle that unit attacks, you can counter blast 1 to restand it if your opponent's Vanguard is at least at grade 3. Meaning another weakness of the deck is that you mainly want to go second. So that's unfortunate. But it does help out a bit because it helps out with the multi-attack and achieves your attack numbers, which is the playstyle of the deck. Hence why there's the second skill where when this card attacks the Vanguard, if it's at least the 4th battle turn, draw a card and choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. I kind of wish that it also gets plus at least 5k just for that extra power, especially since on its own it's really nothing. But it is achievable, especially with the recent support with all the column swapping, all the extra attacks. The only problem still is the small pokes, especially for the Vanguard. But you do have some support that helps out with that, so it's not entirely too bad, but it's still lacking in power. I do like the draw and retire and the achievement here, but overall it's still lacking. In which we go to the main deck itself. Here is 3 more for Persona Ride, and it is going to be very important. In which we go to the Blue Storm Armada card itself, the Judgment Maelstrom. You can cut this down to 3, but you do want to see this as well. Yes, it is searchable, but you want to see as many copies as possible, because when you play this, you put it in the order zone, and then choose one Aqua Force or Tier Dragon from your drop zone and call it. And then choose one of your units. It gets plus 5k power for every other Blue Storm Armada card on your set order zone. AKA not itself, it has to be your other one. So you want to stack these as much as you can. It lets you call something, but it's a trade of 1 for 1. So it's really a bit iffy, but you do have support for this. But at the same time, it's just a little weird to run. While also at the same time, it helps you with extra power, so you do actually want to play this. But unfortunately, we don't really have much to do with this right now. And it's something that I kind of wish that there's more of at the moment. In which we play 4 Inlet Pulse, mainly because it's a tier dragon and it recurs from soul. You don't use it for the first skill because that's only for Flyward, but the second skill where at the end of the turn, if you committed at least 4 attacks this turn, you can put this to soul to draw a card. And the key thing is that it goes to soul, and also the part where you get to also draw, which is also very helpful. And the fact that it's a grade 3 tier dragon, you can use Maelstrom skill on this to call this from soul and redo this every single turn. Because yes, the deck uses a bit of soul in the early game phases, mainly when on your first grade 3 turn, but once you get this along with Maelstrom, usually you don't have soul problems. So you do want to see this as soon as you can, especially since you do want to look from the top 7. It kind of ends up being your main attacker even though it doesn't really get much power. It's just helpful for your resources. So that's it for the grade 3 lineup. To the grade 2 lineup, first off, Tidal Assault. So Tidal Assault, at the end of the battle of its second attack, you can Soul Blast 1 to restand it. There's 2 attacks right there. And the first skill is that when the card attacks, you can Soul Blast 1, choose one of your Maelstrom Vanguards and plus 5k. Helps out with some of the power problems, but it does cost soul, which soul is a bit heavy in this deck. But you do have some ways to not really have soul problems, like Inlet Pulse. But the Counter Blast to restand isn't entirely too bad either, but do still watch out for the Counter Blast. You might not use it fast enough to run out, but do still watch out for it. And it besides a multi-attack card too, so it's just helpful to have a 1 card that can do attack twice. In which we go to the promo that got reprinted, the Flow Fright Brave Shooter. Unfortunately, this is not Aqua Force or Tier Dragon, so this is not searchable. So you will need to rely on drawing this, and in a way, call it from Drop Zone if possible, if you actually run the cards. So first off, it gets plus 5k power for every Blue Storm Auto card in the Order Zone. That's why you want to stack those. And the second skill is that in the back row, at the end of battle that your rear guard in the same column as this unit attacked, you can Counter Blast 1 to swap its position. This column swap beam is really helpful, especially for her to get its own power. Since by the time you will go to grade 3 turn, you will have 1, so it'll be 15k on its own. It's just very helpful for the multi-attack, and this is basically your key card for basically to hit those small numbers on your opponent. And also it's not restricted on your opponent being grade 3, so that's another reason why you must run 4 of this. But compared to Tidal Assault, where he doesn't get power on its own, this is actually much better because of it. And now to run 4 copies of the new card, Mark Clausman Dragon, because when discard from hand, you can Energy Blast 2 to call this to rearguard. Yes, it's a card that you can reoccur, and you will have discard like from Maelstrom and from another card, but mainly from Maelstrom. So the fact that you can reoccur this is just very nice. It's a tier dragon as well, which is another reason. And it also has a second skill where if your Order Zone has a Blue Storm Armada, it gets plus 5k power and 5k shield on your opponent's turn as well. So it's a reoccurring grade 2 that could just basically get some extra power, and it can combo well with the Brave Shooter, which can do some nice column swapping with 15k attacks on both attacks, at least. So I just end up running 4 of this because it's just a good discard target and also a good attacker, and it's a tier dragon, so it just ends up being pretty decent. So that's it for the grade 2 lineup. For the grade 1 lineup, and to help for some column swapping, I play some Wheel Assault, because Wheel Assault at the end of this card boost, you can Soul Blast 1 while your Vanguard is Maelstrom. You can choose 2 rearguards and swap their positions. This is kind of helpful sometimes because sometimes you will end up with weird columns where you have 1 back row rearguard that's grade 2. So this can actually fix part of it where you could just swap them and then do another attack with that card. And this has happened to me a good number of occasions that you kind of wish that you had the Wheel Assault to swap out the columns, because sometimes you might have just the Inlet Pulse along with the new card that you kind of just want to do the column swapping, because that does happen. Overall, it's not completely too necessary, but it's still helpful that it's here. So 2 copies is enough, because still be careful with the soul. And then next to Tier Knights Iriskis, where on place, if your Vanguard is Aqua Force, you can discard a card from hand. That's another way to discard it. Search your deck or drop zone for 1 Blue Storm Armada card and put it back to your hand. So basically it turns your Blue Storm Armada card into a discard target for your ride deck, which is not too bad. And it lets you reflow your Blue Storm Armada, which is something very helpful. In a way, you're discarding a card for a Superior Call card, which is not too bad. But you don't really need that many of this, and it's just here for some extra help if you need it, especially since this deck is still key piece reliant. Next, the Battle Siren Etheria, where when placed from hand, you can Energy Charge 2. Definitely very helpful, especially with the dragon. But the main part is that at the beginning of your battle phase, if you have at least a grade 3 or greater Vanguard tier dragon, you can Soul Blast 1 and then choose one of your units. It gets this skill. When this card attacks, plus 5k into the end of turn. It's very nice because you've got multi-attack rear guards, and having those tier dragons attack twice, get plus a total of 10k overall. It's just overall not too bad, and it helps out with some of the power problems in the deck, especially since your rear guard is more likely likely to hit harder than your Vanguard, but you can also give your Vanguard some extra power as well, just so you can actually help out with some of the power problems, hence why I run this. Because at the end of the day, your rear guards are still going to do small pokes, so if your rear guards get some extra power, it's just way more helpful than basically doing nothing. Hence why I decided to just run 2 of these just to help out with some of the power. Still be careful with the soul because it costs a soul. And to help out with some of the soul, I run the 2 prize trident because when you commit your 5th attack, you can put this as soul to countercharge 1. It goes to soul and countercharge, which are both helpful resources for the deck. So I still want to run it, but it does have to be the 5th attack. So do still watch out for your numbers, but it is easy to do your 5th attack. And also watch out for the timing this card boosts. And then finally, for PGs, we don't have an Aqua Force themed PG yet. And then finally, to the trigger lineup, the OT, 8 crits, Tear Dragon crits because you can search this, 3 draws, and 4 heals, 2 being counter heals. So that's it for this deck profile on my Maelstrom deck. What do you guys think of it? What other changes would you make and what other cards would you recommend? So far I'm still kind of testing out the ratios a bit. This deck is a little weird to kind of build right now considering that this deck is still not that great but still fun to play. It's just overall has cool design, but right now I'm still feeling like it's missing something, especially like a big finisher. Still waiting for Glory Maelstrom, but that's probably when the deck will probably get good. But other than that, there's really not much to say for it. It's just fun to play and kind of worth testing out your ratios, especially on certain cards. It is still very key piece reliant as well, especially rearguard reliant. But on that, that's it for this, and see you all next time.